So to understand anti-Semitism, which my family was so much victims of, I want to look at two essential historical parameters. Following the original Jewish diaspora, Jewish communities performed specific socio-economic functions in their host societies. Abe Leon, who perished in Auschwitz, defined this role as that of a people class, a people performing a specific socio-economic role in society. And it wasn't unique. He lists many societies, Armenians amongst them. Jewish societies and Jews traditionally performed mercantile trade, financial and managerial functions. And I'll just throw out a few examples. They were functionary rulers in Rome in 70, for the Romans in Jerusalem in 70 CE. They were bankers to the King of England in the 13th century. They were estate lord managers in Eastern Europe, in Poland and Ukraine in the 16th century, and they had a very major banking role in Austria in the 1930s. Read the historical novel Hair with Amber Eyes. That's a very powerful account of that. Essentially, therefore, they conformed to and serviced the dominant order. But this role created a very dangerous vulnerability to scapegoating. In an economic crisis or when the ruling group wanted to take over those functions, it meant Jews were very vulnerable, and it was that was the cause of anti-Semitism. It had an economic and a social derivation. Today it comes as no surprise to find that many of the Jewish community are integrated into the normal financial and commercial institutions of modern capitalist society. Many, of course, like myself, are not involved in those things and are found throughout all forms of classes of society. But I want to just pick up on some of the points that have been made in relation to the Bund that have been referred to by other people. It arose in the 18th and 19th century in Russia, Poland, Romania, at the period of the height of the pogroms against the Jews. It was in the period of massive industrialization, the formation of a huge working class, and because there was a big Jewish community there, Jews were very much part of that working class. It was a trade union, it was a welfare organization, it was a political organization, and it achieved dominance in the Jewish community. It was very much central in the 1905 and 1917 revolutions, and its core principles to eradicate racism and anti-Semitism were that there should be a fundamental change in the structure of the society in which we live. They wholly rejected and opposed the nationalist, separatist, territorial solution that was that of Zionism. By 1917, it had relegated Zionism to an insignificant movement. However, during the First World War and the Civil War in Russia, the working class, and with it the Jewish working class, were decimated, and that left the door open for the growth of political Zionism. That period in this country also was the height of working class militancy. We're in Liverpool. In 1911, there was the Liverpool dock strike when Churchill sent gunboats up the Mersey. There was the minority movement, the Shop Stewards Committee movement, the 1915 Clyde rent strike, Clyde workers' committees, and of course the height of the militant suffragettes. Jews fleeing the pogroms, like my grandfather, constituted the refugee problem of the day. Lord Balfour, who was responsible for the Aliens Act in 1905, published his famous declaration 1 month after the October Revolution in Russia. There was a real fear here of socialism. It was a way of diverting Jewish refugees away from the UK to Palestine, and it was a classic playing of the race card. In that period, in that vacuum, as I said, that left the opportunity for political Zionism to develop. I just have a quick look at the Israeli Labour Party. Its name is deceptive. It has got nothing to do with the principles of our Labour Party here. It was based on the principles of Jabotinsky, whose theory was of the Iron Wall: Jewish land, Jewish labour and Jewish produce to be achieved by purchase, by legal means, or by force if necessary. The Israeli Labour Party was the original political organisation which became the first Israeli government. It was in power from 1948 to 1977. It oversaw, therefore, the military plan Dalat, which resulted in 20 Deir Yassins, annihilations of the people of those villages, and the destruction of 530 others, and the Nakba of 750,000 Palestinian refugees. It handed substantial state power to the Jewish Agency and the Jewish National Fund, whose purpose was to ensure that land was controlled by Jews. It was responsible for the 1967 invasion of the West Bank, creating the occupied territories and another 30,000 refugees. It established settlements in the occupied territories and refused to dismantle those settlements that were even illegal in Israeli law. Today, its leader, Herzog, has established a policy for separating Jews from Palestinians within Israel, proposing to build yet another wall. In 2015, the ILP formed an alliance called the Zionist Camp with Tipsy Livni, who, when she was in the government, supported the bombardment of Gaza. This indicates the degree of the dominance of political Zionism, the ILP being obliged to reassert its Zionist identity to maintain its credibility in Israel. It was closely and is closely allied to the Histadrut, the so-called trade union. I say so-called because it's not a trade union, it never was. It too is based on Jabotinsky's principles. It owned huge corporations, Solal Bene, a construction company, Tandiram, a transport company that transported Palestinian migrant workers, Mekrot, the water company that now is nationalised, Bank Hapolim. At the time, it owned half of the Israeli economy. It helped construct electric fences in South Africa. When Palestinians went on strike, it took their jobs. It organised boycott of Arab workers and Arab produce. And its director at the time, David Hachoin, said, "I would not allow Arabs in my trade union. We poured kerosene on their tomatoes." Ben Gurion, the first prime minister, stated there would have been no Israel without the Histadrut. Today, it refuses to represent Palestinians working in Israel, migrant workers, but the Palestinians are not allowed their own trade union in Israel. Within the UK Labour Party, we have the Jewish Labour Movement, which we've also an awful lot of recently. It's affiliated to the Israeli Labour Party. Its principles, therefore, are of territorial Zionism. I say this hesitatingly, it's affiliated to the World Zionist Organization, but we've just heard in the previous meeting that they've disaffiliated, which means they've disaffiliated in the last week. I wonder why. On the WZO website, go and have a look at it, it has a settlement program. It's in Hebrew, but actually Google will translate it for you. And the World Zionist Organization funds the demolition of Bedouin villages. So we look at the Labour Party here. Swathes of people suspended, waves of allegations of anti-Semitism. As yet, hardly anyone found guilty. And while that's happening, attention is drawn away from the occupation, which has been going on for nearly half a century. 48,000 homes demolished, and that's accelerating really fast. Illegal settlements growing like mushrooms, 600,000 plus settlers, often brutal, aggressive, frequently racist towards Palestinians. And the blockade of Gaza has been going on for a whole decade. And let's be clear what this means. It's not about border control. It's about firestorms of aerial bombardments every 2 or 3 years, which destroy hospitals and schools and clinics and housing and water, sewage, power and communication systems, leaving tens of thousands with life-changing mental and physical injuries, as well as thousands of deaths. It's about preventing rebuilding. It's about deliberate malnutrition, severe water shortage, fishermen used as target practice, repeated destruction of medical facilities. It's about infant mortality rate in Gaza, which is 8 times that of in Israel. It's about 51% of children, that's 400,000 children suffering post-traumatic stress. It's not post-traumatic because the stress is continuing and repetitious. It's not only the world's biggest prison, it's the world's biggest physical and psychological torture chamber. Yet the JLM supported the last protective edge attack on Gaza. How then can a Jewish state conceive of inflicting such obscene violence on a people? To understand, we need to look at economics and ideology. We need to look no further than the arms trade. Between 2000 and 2007, Israeli arms exports totaled 29.7 billion, making it the third biggest in the world. In 2013, the year before the attack on Gaza, UK licenses for arms sales totaled 25 million. In the attack that followed, 2,400 Palestinians were killed, 530 children. The total of all UK military-related exports to Israel in 2013, including communications and electronic systems, was a staggering £7.9 billion. Israel is the UK's biggest arms customer. The UK is the second biggest arms trader in the world. Together, they're at the top of the tree. Go to the XL Arms Fair in London and you'll see them being advertised as field tested. That means on Palestinians in Gaza. During that Gaza bombardment, some settlers took their sofas out onto the hillside, opened bottles of beer as if sitting down in front of television. What is the mentality? What's the particular brand of political ideology which flows from and enables this behaviour? There are many hundreds of thousands of Jews in the world who are not Zionists. Jewish culture and identity existed well before Zionism. In fact, 2,500 years before Zionism. It's a recent political ideology. It's not a religion, it's not a racial characteristic, and it's certainly not an essential component of Jewish identity. Historically, there are a whole number of different forms of Zionism, from humanist and socialist through to practical, labour, revisionist and so on. A good example of humanist Zionism was Reuven Moscovitch, an 82-year-old Holocaust survivor who was on our boat to Gaza. He's founded one of the first kibbutzim when he was liberated in 1945. On land that wasn't owned by anyone, by Palestinians, wasn't used by Bedouin. It expanded and the committee decided that they wanted to take more land forcefully. He and his colleagues objected and got kicked off the kibbutzim. He went on to form another organisation called Wahat Salam Nev Shalom with others, and it's a community that exists today, both Jewish and Palestinian, in Israel. He is and was a humanist Zionist. But it coalesced in Zionism into two camps, and political Zionism won the day and became completely dominant. Herzl, the founder, always argued that it needed a main power to support it if it was going to successfully achieve a Jewish state. And the doors are open. Ronald Storrs, governor of Jerusalem, argued a little loyal Jewish Ulster in a sea of hostile Arabism. Lloyd George saw it as an essential buffer for the empire. The genius of political Zionism was to redefine the function of a people class from one located within the domestic environments of a country into one performing an international role between countries and serving major powers. As such, it secured England's route to India, the Suez Canal, and later West control of oil. This enabled it to develop itself as a major industrial military complex. So I just want to talk about Zionism just quoting the words of the original Zionists. Herzl: when we occupy the land, we must expropriate gently. We must remove the poor discreetly and circumspectly. Weitz, the head of the Jewish Agency: there is no other way than to transfer the Arabs. Not one village, not one tribe should be left. Ben Gurion, the first Prime Minister, said to the Haganah army commander, the cleansing of Palestine remains the prime objective of Plan Dalat. Look at them today, their derivatives. Eilak Shaked, who's the Justice Minister, during the Israeli invasion in 2014, posted on her Facebook, the entire Palestinian people is the enemy. It's elderly, it's women, it's cities, it's villages, it's property, and it's infrastructure. That's the Justice Minister. Lieberman, the Defence Minister, founder of Zionist Forum for Soviet Jewry, said of the Arab members of the Knesset, the fate of the collaborators would be identical to those who collaborate with the Nazis. They were executed after Nuremberg. When people criticise Zionism, their understanding is informed by the legion of human rights violations. while those with an emotional commitment to Israel claim these are demonizing and delegitimizing Israel. In our view, it is Israel which is delegitimizing itself by its actions. Okay, all right. Okay. So it's absolutely legitimate for me as a Jew, especially for me as a Jew, to criticise Israel and the ideas that used to sustain it. There's a connection between poverty and the attacks that have been going on. There's been a shift in the current crisis from the poor to the rich. Oxfam says that there are 5 families now who are richer than 12.6 million people in the country. So Jeremy Corbyn represents this 12.6 million. So the establishment wants to attack him. The Israeli establishment and the Jewish main establishment here want to attack him because of the growing criticisms of Israel's human rights violations and the growth of the boycott movement. So they fomented anti-Semitism to provide the ideal weapon. So they take Israel and they take Zionism and they take Jew and they conflate them into one identity. So they can create a perfect storm of anti-Semitism. And this scares the hell out of people to silence them, to attack BDS and to attack Corbyn and the left. Well, here's one Jew who won't be silenced. Here's one Jewish organisation which proclaims loudly, not in our name. Gaza is about to be, by 2020, the United Nations says it will become uninhabitable. It's becoming another Sarajevo. It's actually a genocide in slow motion.
It is a genocide, yeah.
And people have to stand up. We in the Labour Party have to stand up. The government has to stand up. And we have to put an end to this. Because we won't be silenced. We'll never be silenced. From the core of our soul, we demand the end of the siege. We demand freedom for Gaza. And let's be clear, the Labour Party here has hitched itself to the wrong Jewish tradition. It's hitched itself to the settler tradition, which has as its programme the dispossession of the Palestinians, when it should hitch itself to the Jewish socialist tradition, has its roots in the Bund, and for which we speak. So please, help us build this organisation to extend our influence in the Labour Party to get this message over in contradiction to the Jewish labour movement. Thank you very much.